Welcome to our Memory Monday Rewind. Please enjoy this episode, Victim Blaming, first published February 20th, 2023. Welcome to Why Complain When You Can Whine, making sense of the senseless. Three professional women attempting to make sense of toxic nonsense while drinking wine. Pardon me, I'm Dr. Jody Larman, licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. Therefore, everything that we discuss on this podcast is for psychoeducational and entertainment purposes only. And today is National Drink Wine Day. So I am drinking, actually, it's wine adjacent. I don't know if you can see this. It is called Secco Grapefruit Pompolini, and it is a tart blend of carbonated white grape wine and grapefruit juice. So I am drinking this because we are day drinking today.
Ha! The sun is out.
And my glass says liquid therapy.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello, I'm Heather, licensed professional counselor and domestic violence survivor out of Denver, Colorado. I'm drinking the same wine that I was drinking last week, the Snoop Dogg wine, and my cup is the Do All Things with Kindness, You Fucker.
Love it.
I
Love it.
And my face is red and splotchy today because I went to the med spa, got microneedling done. She wrecked my face. It's a little splotchy. I didn't get slapped. So
You're a hot mess, Heather.
today.
You didn't wreck your face.
Damn it. I'm here.
They do wreck your face to
bring
put it
out
all
the-
back together again.
Beauty is pain. Beauty is pain.
I love that self-care moment.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I am Ashley Page, founder of Loving Single. I am a single mom and domestic violence survivor. And today I am drinking sangria from my local winery. I'm on the VIP list. So I just
actually got on that VIP list just because of you.
Oh my God, I get 6 boxes or 6 bottles, 6 boxes, 6 bottles, 6 bottles every
You are VIP.
every 3 months. And today I am cracking open the sangria, and I just have my favorite wine glass because I feel bougie, even though I'm not in the daytime.
Damn, I feel so normal. I need to be VIP. I need to get on this list. I feel like,
Well, you know,
would be
it's
VIP,
because when you come, then we can go drink for free.
yes.
Exactly. And I'm coming. Believe me, I'm on my way over the mountain to come see you and go drink there. And I ordered the sangria too, and I got 5 other ones.
Yes.
Well, I've been
So-
looking up flights, so
Fuck yes. Hell
Yep.
yeah. Cheers, ladies.
cheers.
Cheers.
This is actually perfect for like
Ooh.
brunches, day drinking, and brunches.
Are you guys, no one said anything about how proud they were of me that I'm drinking a dark red wine.
So proud of you. Sangria is not that dark red, but
Because
one
it's sangria actually,
Look at that one. That one is.
that's pretty
when
dark.
after I had my son, my cholesterol was high, and he said it was probably from pregnancy and all that. It turns out it's genetic, but he was telling me some of the things, the doctor was telling me some of the things I can do, and he goes, drink red wine. And I'm like, I don't drink red wine. I drink white wine and rosés. He's like, no, red wine. I said, really? They don't count? He goes, no, it's the red wine. Like, okay. So I started with sangria because that's what everyone said is like, if you don't drink red wines, really start with sangria and kind of get into that. And so that was my starter red wine, my gateway to red wine.
It's delicious, man. This is scrumdiddlyumptious.
And you can have it cold too, right? Sangria can be cold too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
But then again, I'm not a wine snob. So I think however you want to drink wine, cold or not, it's fine.
Through a straw and a glass up
Yeah.
your nose, however
This-
you like it.
with a spoon. As a popsicle. Yes, I'll take them
Yes.
all. So today's topic is we just passed Galentine's Day and Single Awareness Day. What is our topic for the day?
Heather.
We are going to talk about victim blaming today because it's just been one of those things that keeps popping up on my For You page on TikTok and in other places. And I thought it would be a good thing to talk about is that concept and what it means and what victim blaming looks like.
I've done a few videos on victim blaming because sadly, it is pretty rampant on TikTok and in society as well. I
Totally.
mean, look at what you're wearing.
Yep.
We're asking for it.
Yeah, well, so let's start off because I think a lot of people don't even know what victim blaming is. They've heard the top. There's so many topics on all over social media and, everywhere where they're just kind of like hot buzzwords and people are like, oh yeah, that, and they have no idea what it actually is. So let's
Victim
find out
blaming-
from the professionals. What is victim blaming?
Victim blaming and victim shaming, both of those kind of, to me, go a lot of hand in hand. So Heather, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, in the world of criminal justice where I work, victim blaming happens a lot. It's just for like a perpetrator from their perspective, it's really a way to shift blame away from the person who's abusing and place it on the person being abused. So, and it's like a really subtle thing that people don't realize they're doing sometimes when they're doing it, because it's such like there are just common myths around these types of like victim perpetrator relationships, right? So like, for example, as Jody said, the whole rape myth of women who wear the wrong clothing or whatever are partially responsible then for someone else sexually assaulting her. And like we know now in this day and age, most human beings know that that's a myth and that's not true. That's really distorted thinking. But there are still some people that believe that, like that hold on to that. And I mean, I evaluate sex offenders on the side, so I know that that's still a distortion that a lot of perpetrators carry. And then that sort of like value system almost like it is also present in victims, families, victims' friends, and just like normal non-perpetrator people, which sort of perpetuates the problem because then victims start feeling like, shit, I am to blame. It is my fault. Reporting these incidents goes to the shitter because nobody feels comfortable reporting when things happen to them, whether it's a sexual assault or domestic violence or whatever, because they already have internalized this like sense of shame around, I should have known better. And so that kind of thinking is like sort of seeped out over the many years and is still like a stronghold for a lot of people, which surprises me. But I work in criminal justice, so I feel like I kind of always am challenging people's thinking in this, and they seem to be able to turn it around fairly quickly when I'm just like, change your perspective and work with people on this. But then I see shit on TikTok where there are people who are claiming to be in like helping roles that are still victim blaming, and I'm like, this doesn't, like, it just doesn't make sense. And people that are victims blame themselves still. So anyway, that's sort of,
Well, it's not necessarily this overt thing. Like when you hear of someone, for example, in a toxic relationship, a lot of people will be like, well, why did they stay? Why don't they just leave? How come if they got in this fight and he did this or she did this, why didn't they just move out? Why didn't they just leave? Why did they come back? And if they weren't married, why don't they just leave? Why don't they separate? So people don't always realize that they're victim blaming when they say things like, if you hear of someone sometimes who got SA'd, people will say, well, why were they walking there alone? Like,
Yeah.
that's-
Why were they alone at night? Why were they wearing what they were wearing? Why were they drinking too much? Why
were they looking at
Were
their
they-
phone? Why were they in that neighborhood? Why it's, you know, and I understand that people will have those kinds of questions, but it's typically the first thing that pops into people's minds isn't holy crap, this happened. Who the fuck did this? More of a, well, why did you go to that bar?
Mhm.
Oh my God.
Well, and
Why
I
did you
think,
drink so much?
yeah, and I think that a lot of where the line, because there's a very, very thin line where people step into victim blaming, and they get confused once they start discussing the topic of self-accountability and self-responsibility. And that's where a lot of people don't understand, where they'll go to this space of taking responsibility and turn it into an opportunity in order to blame the victim, and saying things like, well, you know, if you're in an abusive relationship and you know you're in an abusive relationship and you don't get out of it, it's your fault. Like, or, you know, like if you know that there are a lot of men at the bar drinking and they're drunk, and you show up wearing a specific alluring, you know, outfit, and you're there by yourself, then it's your, like, you're, you know, like we've all said, you're asking for it, or why are you surprised? And like, there is a very big difference, you know, because I'm a big fan of taking responsibility for yourself and being accountable and self-awareness. And there is a certain level of self-awareness and understanding, like being able to look in the future and say, oh, well, this is happening, I should probably not do this because of that, versus the difference to being like, in looking in the past and being like, well, this happened to you and it's your fault.
And especially when it comes to relationships, and people say, now that you know this person is toxic, why did you stay? Once you realized and found out this person was abusive, now you know. So from here on in, it's your fault for staying. Maybe in the beginning you didn't really know, but now you do. So you should just walk away, because now it's on you for staying, because you know.
Well, so so this is one of the reasons why I love that I'm not licensed and I'm not a doctor, because I can kind of see through the lens of a lot of people who are like, well, then what the fuck? So does that mean that because there is the perspective, and I can relate to it. There is the perspective of, okay, so when is it time for someone to take accountability? And when are they supposed to take responsibility for knowing better and not doing better? Or is it just always victim blaming? Because there are a lot of people, like, for example, me, I was raised in a, like, I love my parents to death. I was really blessed to have the parents I do. However, there was a lot of toxic behaviors that were just normalized in my household. And so coming from that environment, there was a lot of victim blaming. And I think it can be very confusing for people who have grown up in normalized chaos and toxicity. It's hard for them to understand the difference between healthy habits and toxic ones, and how to distinguish the difference between, for example, me right now being who I am, and like, okay, I'm going to tell on myself to the audience. So on Valentine's, I texted Jody and Heather and I said, oh my God, I called my ex, not my abusive one, but I called this one of my exes. That was amazing. And Heather was like, no, why did you do that? So I'm using that as like just a gentle, like, metaphor for being like the difference between knowing better and doing better versus victim blaming. Can we like unpack that a little bit? Because that can be very confusing.
That person wasn't an abusive person to you. That's a totally different scenario. When you're talking about people who grew up in toxicity and trauma and abuse and things like that, and that becomes like quote unquote normal to them, the reality is that's not fucking normal to live like that. And in narcissistic relationships, those are also not normal relationships. Those are very abnormal, unhealthy, dysfunctional relationships. So to ask people to have personal accountability for abuse and dysfunction that is happening to them in their relationships isn't fair. But it's understandable because people want to think that if we know better, we can prevent shit from happening, because we like to have our lives being predictable and knowing how to keep ourselves safe. So when we see other people getting abused in their relationships, we think, well, fuck, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to see, like, I see how dysfunctional it is. I don't ever want to be in a situation like that. So I'm going to essentially distance myself from this by victim blaming and saying, you should be accountable, because I know I would have been accountable in that situation, but you don't know because you weren't in that situation. So you can't even test that hypothesis. This is Dr. Carrie McAvoy talking, but you can't even test that hypothesis because you aren't in that situation, because the person that you fell in love with was hiding who the fuck they were and was deceiving you. And so by the time you figure it out to say, oh, you could have prevented this if you had just like known better, if you had just done X, Y, and Z, if you had more self-love, if you have better boundaries, then like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have self-love and good boundaries so I never get abused. That it doesn't fucking work that way. We don't walk into abusive relationships knowing that they're fucking abusive. So you didn't grow up in a traumatic abusive household knowing that that was abusive. Sorry.
No, a narcissist or any kind of abuser, you don't walk up and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and they punch you in the face. And you say, oh, that's how this relationship is going to be. Well, I'm going to stay. No, it doesn't start out that way. I don't know statistics, but I'm going to just hypothetically, I'm going to say a 99% of relationships start out with nice, kind, love bombing, mind fucking, gaslighting. I am who you want me to be. And then comes the abuse. And by that time also, remember, when someone is showing you love on the one hand, and then there's abuse, and then they're showing you love right after that, because there's a honeymoon period, and that honeymoon period of, oh my God, I am so sorry. And I'm not going to do that again. And you want to believe that, but time after time, your head has been so messed with, your mind has been so fucked with. And if you've been through traumatic, and even if you haven't been through traumatic relationships in the past with your family or a romantic partner, even if this is your first one, when they start mind fucking you so much, it starts to affect your brain. It starts to affect your amygdala, your hippocampus, your prefrontal cortex, all of those things that you're going like up and down and up and down. And then you start to question your own sanity, and you're walking on eggshells. And is this going to start a fight? Are we going to be okay? And you're already enmeshed, and you're so enmeshed that it's not easy to just say, okay, bye-bye.
Right. You don't even trust yourself anymore.
Well,
you don't even trust reality.
And I agree with you on that, but let me rephrase my question. My question is not about someone who walks into something that they don't know. My question is about a person who walks into a situation where they do know better. So for example, if because I'm asking not just as a person, but also even asking as a mother with our kids, where's the distinction between self-accountability and responsibility and then victim blaming, because I think a lot of people aren't intentionally, I'm not making excuses, but I see this a lot. And I used to be guilty of this all the time, even as a survivor, is the lines become so blurry and so gray between taking responsibility for your actions and then understanding the difference between situations where that was something that was completely outside of your control and you had no responsibility in it whatsoever. So for example, I've seen people say things like, oh, here's a great one. Dr. Jody, you're a psychologist. You know better, so you should do better. How did you get yourself in that situation? Because you know about boundaries, you know about emotional regulation, you understand the signs of a narcissist. You like, how did you not see this? And then also, for example, like, let's say now that you've been in a narcissistic abusive relationship, going into it now, how do you take self-responsibility to ensure that doesn't happen again? And I know it might sound convoluted, but I think that's where people get really confused, because it's like, well, fuck, then nothing's anyone's fault. And then I just know my ex, who's extremely abusive, and he's like, well, see, none of it's my fault. Stop blaming me because I have a personality disorder and I have this and all these things happen to me. And so it gets so twisted. And that's why I feel like it's such a confusing and great topic to be discussing. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know that breaking a couple of things up. When you're a mom, you always want to do what you feel is right for your kids. And sometimes that means, oh my gosh, I want my child to they love their father or the father figure. And I'm just talking about being a single mom. And they get along so well and they're not harming them. So maybe it's not as bad as I think. And it's worse if I take this person out of my child's life, because that's going to hurt my child. And I, from experience, know that I had been with my ex for 4 years. And it was the only time, in my opinion, that we split up. He, I guess, broke up with me every half an hour or whatever. He was discarding me and I never knew. But in 2012, I was done. That was it. And I called it. And that, after that, my ex wasn't coming to my house. And my son started, he was 9, and he was in the YMCA, and he started acting out. And they were telling me every day, he's getting red cards. His behavior, what is going on? And I was like, shit, this is hurting my son, because this is the guy that he looked up to as his father figure, because his father wasn't around. And this is the guy that was playing basketball with him. This was the guy that was playing catch with him. This was the guy that was taking him to the movies. And now, I'm on edge, I'm upset, I'm sad, and his behavior is horrible. So after like 2 weeks, my ex wanted to talk, and I was like, okay, we can talk. And we were out in the backyard, and I saw my son looking out his upstairs window, watching us. And later on that day, he's like, I saw that you guys were talking. And my heart just was like, oh my God, what am I doing to my child? So I got back together with my ex. I mean, he wasn't as abusive. I mean, it got worse as the time went on. And I thought I was doing the right thing for my child, and that it wasn't as bad as I really was thinking it was. And it was stuff that could be fixed. And now I look back and go, holy crap, I was doing probably the worst thing for my child. But at the time, and again, context is everything. And it's easy to look back, and hindsight is 2020. But when you're a parent, you want to do, like, if you have a daughter and your daughter's like, but mommy, that's my daddy, and I love my daddy, and my daddy's great, and he hasn't physically hurt you, and you're already fucked up, like, maybe I am the one that's the problem, maybe I am too hard, maybe I am whatever, you start blaming yourself. And it's like, okay, it makes my daughter happy and I don't want to ruin my daughter's life. So it's hard when you are, I think I have heard a lot of parents that I can't leave because of my kids. I don't want to hurt my kids. And I talk to them about, you're actually causing more damage than you realize. And I do know that from experience. I don't tell them that, but I know that from experience, that what we think in the moment is right, what we're doing. If we could look if we had a magic crystal ball, then so many things would be different.
So you just said something so important. I just want to ask about it. That when you said you think to yourself, well, you're actually causing more damage. Now, if you said that to someone, would that be considered victim blaming?
You have to say it in the right way.
Okay, because see, that's kind of what I'm talking about, the difference between victim blaming and also helping, I don't know how to say this properly, but like helping to point something out to a person that they can readily change. Now, being stuck inside, I can't readily change the fact that I was raped, and me being raped wasn't my fault. But if I'm inside of a situation that I can readily change, and being inside of a physically abusive relationship that could cost your life or your personal safety to get out of, is not something you can readily change. So I just want to make that disclaimer. But a situation like that you're talking about, how would someone communicate that to someone they love so that it's not a victim blaming statement? Or is it better for us just to keep our mouths shut? And I'm genuinely asking because I was raised in a home of victim blaming.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I ask is, okay, why do you think it's better to stay for your kids? Because research has shown that children in a dysfunctional, angry, violent household of married parents do not do as well as parents who can get along in front of the kids and are separated. But it's civil when they're making changes, as long as the parents are happy separate. So that's why one normal parent, if you will, is important. But I'll ask them, okay, why do you feel that staying together is the best thing? And what actually are your reasons? If it's financial, let's talk about that. If it's that you feel that you can change the person, let's talk about that. So it's all the reasons behind, because it's usually more than just, well, I'm staying together for the kids. A lot of times, like I had actually a friend who said, if I leave her, she's going to take the kids and I'm screwed, and she's going to move away, or she's going to take my house from me. And then I can't give anything to my kids, or she's going to move far away. So I'm staying together for the kids. It's like, okay, no, you're actually still staying together for you. And it's like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but let's get to the real reason that you feel it's better to stay together for kids.
Okay. Go ahead, Heather.
And then, like, this is what in the therapy world we call meeting people where they're at. Like, to avoid like victim blaming in that sense, it's about like just understanding the person and where they're at in that moment, and not telling them like, dude, this is your fucking fault, like, because that's victim blaming. But saying like, help me understand what your thinking process is, what's going on, and what you want from this or whatever. And then gently saying, here's where I see this going, you know, and offering them some education and knowledge about like, this is, you know, from experience where I see this relationship headed. And whatever they think about that, it's more about empowering them to make their own choices and their own relationships, because that's really what it is. If you shame them into thinking there's something fucking wrong with me, you are not affecting any change at all.
I love that because I think that no one teaches us this shit. No one. Like what you said and what Jody said, God, I like had so many thoughts while both of you were saying it, is how the very big difference between telling someone about a situation that you weren't there for, first of all, and telling them, oh, well, you are this. And so victim blaming comes from a place of shame. And then what you both are saying on how to discuss this with someone, because I think a lot of our listeners too aren't just survivors or victims. They may be family members who have moms or sisters or daughters or whoever, brothers who are in a bad relationship, and they're like, I don't know how to fucking communicate with them. Every time I'm upsetting them, I don't know how to bring this up, I'm concerned about them. And the difference between saying this is your fault, you shouldn't stay, you need to leave, versus seeking to find understanding on why they're continually making the choices that they're making and why they're staying in like the relationship. And also allowing those questions that you're asking them to help them discover the answer versus just telling them your fucking thwarted opinion. Did I get
always tell my
in
clients,
a brief breakdown? Is that about right?
yeah, because I tell my clients, I'm just the navigator to help give you directions on how to get there. You're the driver. And if you don't want to take those directions, that's fine. Then let's talk about it. Why do you want to take a different way? It's when people can come up with their own solutions, I'm just there to kind of maybe guide them to figure out that solution. Because if I tell you to do something.
Yeah. And if I'm asking, like, what do you want for your life? Like, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want this relationship to look like? And they're telling me they want X, Y, and Z, all these positive, healthy, awesome things for themselves. Like, that's great. Like, that's awesome. Do you think you're going to get that in this relationship? Because I don't see it, and
Yeah.
And that kind of takes it off of what the fuck is wrong with you for staying with this person and puts it on like, how is this relationship getting you to the relationship goals that you actually have for yourself and like the life that you want to have?
And
right.
Also, some people are just plain old scared.
Totally.
They're scared to leave for
Totally.
a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid he's going to smear my name. He's gonna take everything that I have. He's gonna go to my job. He already has called them a few times. They're ready to fire me.
He's gonna call the cops.
Yeah. And I don't have the money for that. A lot of times relationships, they're in charge of the money, not the victim. So it's like, I have no money. Where am I going to live? Where am I going to go?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some that are like, my family loves him or her or whatever. I'm going from a women's point of view. My family loves him. And if I they don't think he can do any wrong. And so they're not going to believe me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many reasons. It's not
one reason people don't leave.
Yeah.
You'll believe them.
It's the number one reason. And
yeah.
and a lot of it too is, even for me, I remember thinking to myself, like, and it like really makes me sad to remind myself of that thought process, was no one's going to want me after I leave him, and he's the best I'm going to get. And I'd rather be with him than be alone for the rest of my life. And I don't know how to be on my own. And at least he loves me part of the time, was a lot of my thought process.
I'm embarrassed to say, I cannot tell you how many times I would tell my friends, well, I mean, it's better than nothing.
Right.
Better than being alone. At least I have someone to go out with all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, I hate saying this, but like having this conversation helps me to understand why there's so much unnecessary victim blaming in the survivor community. And I think, I think it's projection. And I think I'll say for myself, I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I adapted so many different forms of toxic behavior just by enduring the abuse for over a decade, that it became part of my behavior, what he did to me and how he talked to me, and my anger and the way I would lash out and the way I talk to people, the way he treated me. I started projecting that onto other people. And I hate to say this, but the amount of victim blaming I hear and see from other quote unquote survivors is enough to just like suffocate me. Like, because I've learned a lot, especially like in my relationship with both of you and like during my healing journey. And but God, man, I've just seen some people just be so disgusting and victim blaming with other survivors, and it just makes me sick to my fucking stomach, because I'm just like, you know what? If you've been there, then you would understand that this wasn't their fault. And how could you say that that's her fault or his fault? Like, how dare you say that? Or, you know, and as an SA survivor, anyone saying like, well, you should have known better, I just want to punch people in the face.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, like
Yeah,
one of my,
me too.
when
I would never, but I just want to.
when I talk to people too, like I'll tell my friends, you know what? I will support you, whatever you do. I'm going to support you. However, do you honestly think that that is the best thing to do? Whatever you decide, I'll be there for you. But I'd love, and since I'm a psychologist, it's easier for me to say this. I'd love to know your thought process on that. I'd love to know why. Talk to me about it, you know? But if that's what you want to do, you know, and that's another thing is like trying, and Heather, you might do this too, or I might be completely doing my own thing, and tell me if that's the case, if I should change it. But what I also do is like, okay, let's discuss, what is your thought process on this? Why do you feel that this is a good idea? And sometimes in there talking it out, it's like, okay, so explain that to me. Then they just kind of answer their own question of, yeah, that's probably not the best thing, is it? It's like, so let's talk about that. Why do you think it's not the best thing? So you're trying to get them to see, you know, I'm not going to blame. Okay, let's just go way out on a limb and say you went to a bar wearing almost near nothing, knowing that this bar had a lot of rowdy frat boys. I'm not going to say that what happened to you should never have happened. And if you want to take some responsibility, why? Let me ask, why do you want to take responsibility for it? If that makes you feel some sort of control, I'm not going to take that away from you. But what do you gain, honestly, from saying, yes, it was my fault and I shouldn't have done that? Was what they did right? Doesn't matter what you were wearing. If you were wearing jeans, would that have not happened? Would that have changed anything? Do you really think so? You know, because I have had people that they've been in bars and their drink got drugged.
I have. My drink has been drugged so many times.
And I've said, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't do that again. It's like, do what? Never go out again? Because you should know
what it's doing. That's what victim blaming does to people, is it puts them in this like shame cycle that repeats itself over and over and over again. And like, and then it creates an environment where they're re-victimized over and over and over again. And then they are in situations that are dangerous, because that's, like Ashley said about your early childhood trauma, it becomes normal to kind of expected to kind of be in situations where it's like, holy fuck. And that's why victim blaming is a problem. That's why you have to be really careful with it, because if you're telling everyone that they're responsible, you are negating the fact that there are really fucking awful, horrible, abusive individuals out there that need to be held 100% accountable for their behavior, and they're not. So I promise you, and this is for all of the listeners out there, working in criminal justice, I work with offenders all the time. And I will always, 100% of the time, whether it's domestic violence, sex offense, whatever, whether they robbed you or stole your car, 100% of the time, I will hold them 100% accountable for their behavior. Not 85% because they were drunk or high, not 50% because you chose to go back to the relationship 100 times. I will always hold these motherfuckers 100% accountable for every fucking abusive behavior they engage in that hurts another person, period. And I will never hold a victim responsible. I don't care what the fucking situation was.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and
and I think that is the point, is that the difference between holding yourself responsible for your choices versus holding yourself responsible for someone else's choices. And that, I think, is the clear defining line. If I go and put my finger on a hot stove that I knew was hot, that's on me. Now, if someone, does something, if I go somewhere and someone drugs my drink or robs me or essays me, that is something that someone else has done to me. And therefore, regardless of how I got to that place, it's not my fucking fault.
And I'm gonna change that just a little bit, because if you touched a hot stove because somebody told you it was not hot and it was safe to touch, so you touched it, is that still your fault?
See, even if you see men, like I have clients and myself, I've been like this. Even if you see that the stove is really, really hot and you think that's really hot to me and I'm going to touch it because I like hot things. I think I like hot things anyway. Like, even then, if they turn and fucking burn you, they still burn people. Like, that's still not fucking okay.
But here, what I'm saying is, in like a narcissistic, an NPD relationship, you know that the stove is hot because you guys cooked something on it just recently. So odds are it's still hot. But the toxic person says, no, it's not hot. It's not hot. Touch it.
Totally. Well, and I just was, and I agree with you on that. All that I was saying was trying to give a clear example of when it's appropriate to take responsibility for my choices and my behavior in a decision I've made versus taking responsibility for something someone else has done to me.
Okay.
Because I think that, like, I have a really good example, but for the sake of my daughter's privacy, I'm not going to give it. So I was trying to think of like an easy one. But I think that, like, for me, for example, I grew up in a home where it had to be someone's fault. And no matter what happened, it had to be someone's fault. And so I grew up with the mentality that, and I think a lot of victims and survivors do this, if they're not going to take responsibility, I have to, because it helps me to feel in control about the situation. And so I would victim blame myself all day long, like, because it's my fault. It's my fault that he hit me. It's my fault that he strangled me. I made him angry, and it was always my fault because he wouldn't take responsibility, and someone fucking had to.
Well, and how many times did anyone ever tell you, I wouldn't have hit you if you didn't do this? So you're getting blamed regardless. And how many little kids, I mean, you see it on, they even talk about it in movies. There's a whole movie genre about it. When parents are getting divorced, how many kids think it's their fault? How many kids think it's their fault if their parents are fighting? So we start at a very young age blaming ourselves because it had to be something that we did. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And as we get older, when we have other people blaming, and again, in the survivor group, that's a lot of projection, because I know I didn't do it, but I'm going to tell you what you should have done. Like, so I just right there.
I've seen, especially like on places like TikTok, you see a lot of these life coaches saying things like, well, if you know that, this is happening, then it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility. And and they're so confused and they're so quick to blame. And the reality is even at that point, there is nothing that gets accomplished by finding the root of whom to blame. It's actually
Right.
how to help the person to deal with and heal from and move on from that situation, because pointing the finger and blaming someone, you accomplish nothing.
I say that all the time. Let's not do blame. Let's do, now what do we do?
Right.
Now we know. Now what do we do? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at this point. Whose fault, who's whatever. What are you going to do from here on in now? Let's work on a resolution for your own well-being.
Yeah.
Your well-being is the most important thing. And I swear to fucking God, sorry, if I see or hear relationship coaches that say, well, if you have self-love, then you would have boundaries. If you loved yourself more, then you could work through your trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And
A
motherfucker,
codependent. Yeah.
it's like, you can have all the self-love that you want. I don't hate myself. And I was still in an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say I love myself, but I don't hate myself.
Yeah.
And I was in an abusive relationship.
Totally. Well, who was it which one of you was it, Heather, that sent us that video of that man on TikTok this week? And he was sending out an apology video because he had made a video just like what you had said. And he was actually the one I was referring to a few minutes ago, was where he apologized. And he said, there was the last video I made, I was talking about if you had more boundaries and if you had self-love, then, you know, this and that. And I got a lot of kickback on people telling me you're victim blaming. And he goes, I'm so sorry, that was not my intentions. And so I think that's why it's important to have these discussions and to figure out, like, how do you distinguish your message and your intentions from just covering someone with a bunch of fucking shame and saying it's your fucking fault.
Right.
If you would have had the boundaries, and the reason you didn't have the boundaries is because you don't love yourself enough. Okay. What I'm going to recommend in cases like this, and I know it's easier said than done, but I know in a lot of states, it has now become free. People just don't want to take advantage of the freeness because they think it's less than when they hear free. Go to therapy. If you are ever questioning your self-worth, your self-value, your sanity, your reality, if you ever question any of those, and if you are in a relationship that actually you now know is toxic, but you can't get out for whatever reason, you can't get out, go to therapy. Go to therapy, because therapy will help you to kind of open up that, why can you not get out? What is the what's another word? What's blocking you? I can't think of what's the barrier? Sorry. What is the barrier to change? What is happening? You know, sometimes
and
honestly,
if it's not like feasible to find a therapist, find people who work and are trained in domestic violence and the cycle of abuse, and actually have some knowledge on how to empower victims, not shame and blame them to death and to change. Like, we know in the field of addiction that shaming and telling people that their addiction was a result of some moral failing or lack of boundaries and self-love has not helped people recover from addiction. It doesn't help people recover from toxic and abusive relationships either. So if you need support, find it in the community of domestic violence survivors and in local domestic violence shelters. There's free fucking support groups out there. There's the domestic violence hotline has trained professionals that know how to, one, educate survivors, and two, not fucking blame them for the situation that they're in. And if you're in just, if you're minimizing the fact that you're in a narcissistic relationship, or maybe it's not narcissistic, it's just kind of toxic, I don't give a fuck. If someone is abusing you, you're in a domestic violence situation. And I know Jody said that before, like, this is domestic violence, what you're going through, whether you're getting punched in the face or not. If you're getting mind fucked by somebody, you're in a domestic violence relationship. And so there are like trained professionals out there that are free, that you have access to at your fingertips. Don't just like go and listen to some weird coaches on TikTok that don't have any credentials or training. That's not helping anybody. That they have their opinion, and a lot of it is based on their own projection of their own shit, and it's not helping people get out of these situations. It's not empowering at all. It's just keeping people stuck. It's fostering codependency, and abusive relationships already created those issues with you. So why are like, go get help from actual professionals who know what the fuck they're doing, because that's the bottom line. It's that shaming people into change doesn't work, and empowering people requires some knowledge about power and control and those dynamics in relationships, and how these are different from like normal healthy 2 to tango relationships. So
I want to give out, if you guys had Ashley will put it in the description of this podcast, so you can go to YouTube and get it. I want to give out a link for, this is nationwide, how to get free mental health. So if we can put that in the link, if you guys got a pen, you can re-listen to this, but I'm going to give out, I wish I could write it up here on the screen, but we'll put it in there. You just do the https://www.freementalhealth, all one word, freementalhealth.us/state/whatever state you live in. So /California, Colorado, Mississippi, Ohio, and it will give you, it'll bring up a list of all the places that offer free mental health in your state. So utilize that. Again, we can put that in the in the description of this. So https://www.freementalhealth.us/state/whatever state you live in. And if you need that again and can't find it, and you're, again, we listen to this, but you can also email us at wcwycw1@gmail, and we can give you that information as well. So, and we have domestic violence links and all of that. So if you need resources, just email us. And I've got a link tree full of resources. I think Heather does too. I think Ashley does too. So we can get you whatever resources to get out of, or to get information for this stuff. So, but again, when it comes to victim blaming, like we were saying about, well, if you didn't wear this, if you didn't go there, if you didn't drink this, if you didn't drink that, it happens, it becomes where the victim ends up with depression, not wanting to go out of the house, and wanting to sometimes unalive themselves. Because if I go anywhere, say anything, do anything, it's going to be my fault. And it's not your fault. And other people, like going back to, not to beat a dead horse, but going back to your incident, Ashley, if you were wearing Stay Puft marshmallow clothing, big old down jacket, big old ski pants, your drink still would have been drugged. If your drink was drugged, your drink was drugged, right? So with that, so people who sit there and want to say it's because the clothing that you wore or what you said or did. And again, to everybody out there, no means no at any point in time.
And as a matter of fact, unless I've said yes, it means no.
Like, even if you said yes initially, and then you say no, No means no.
Because I think that like, well, what was used against me, and the reason that I say that is if I haven't said yes to you,
It's an automatic no. Yeah.
that means I've said no to you. So you don't get to touch me and hit on me, and you don't get to assume anything about me because I have not said yes, and I owe you fucking nothing.
And the
Nothing.
inability to give consent, I don't know why I'm leaning forward. The inability to give consent is the same as not getting consent.
And no one, you are never, ever, ever. It's never your fucking fault. I don't care what you were wearing or what you weren't wearing or where you went or if you went alone. I don't give a fuck. It's never your fault.
Nope.
And I am so tired of people saying it's your fault. And then, you know, because I know what it's like to not want to leave your house because you're just afraid that something horrible is going to happen to you, no matter where the fuck you go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to experience unwanted touching or unwanted.
Well, if you didn't wear makeup, no one would look at you. So you could just blend in and you would be fine.
Yeah,
So,
that kind of shit.
Yeah. And listen, every woman has the right to feel sexy. Every woman has the right to dress how she wants to dress. And every woman has the right to walk down the street without feeling the fear of being victimized. And unfortunately, we don't live in that fucking society. And regardless, it's still not your fucking fault.
Yeah. And I don't care if you have bigger boobs than other people. Still doesn't give anybody the right. Well, look at.
No. And we could have an entire other podcast about how children are victimized and they don't have to be wearing anything wrong at all because of pedophiles and predators, and how like it's not so the whole fucking what you're wearing shit, that excuse falls out the fucking door because of that. Like, no, we're not doing that. Not here.
And by that same thing is if you are getting fucked over mentally in a relationship, that is not your fault.
Nope.
If you are getting abused in a relationship, well, you know what? I was standing right next to the cupboard. He's never hit me before. He's only hit the wall. I was standing where he usually hits. So now it's my eye. No one. Or you know what? I was in his face. He told me to walk away. I was in his face. That's why. I don't care. Yeah, maybe it wasn't the best idea to be in his face, but that still does not give him the right to punch you in the eye.
No,
and there's not a clinician in the world that is gonna tell that guy, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, she was in your face.
Okay,
so
I guess it was her
answer.
fault.
you're never at fault for someone else's inability to maintain emotional regulation and control of their own fucking bodies.
Right.
It's not your job to take responsibility for someone else's choices.
And also emotionally, mentally, psychologically, again, domestic violence. And when somebody is mind fucking you and gaslighting you to the point of you literally don't know, and it must be my fault because they're so good at doing that. Please, if you question at all, that's a good time to start getting some mental health help. Once you start to question, once there's a little light bulb of a question coming up, that's a good time to get help. Too often people wait until they're discarded and kicked to the curb and then called back and then kicked to the curb and then called back, and then they kind of go for depression mainly or the end of a relationship. But go when you're ever in question. Because I can tell you, if you get a good clinician, I can't swear that it's never going to cause harm because sadly there are bad mental health clinicians out there. And I hate that I say that, but it's true. But it should never if you're doubting yourself, if you are doubting your self-worth, if you are doubting your self-value, if you are doubting your own sadly existence on this planet, please get help. That is emotional and mental abuse. That is domestic violence. And you are not. Like, I have heard, and you probably have too, Heather, in your career, I have heard it would probably be better if I wasn't here. Maybe that would just fix everything.
I said that. I've said that before.
So have I. Yeah, that's what abuse does to a person. That's not your fault. And that's the hardest thing is once it's all over and this person has completely like torn us apart, then and only then the only thing that we're responsible for is our own healing, because unfortunately, even though they're responsible for destroying us, we have to put ourselves back together, and that's not fucking fair. I remember saying that to the judge at like sentencing hearing number whatever the fuck it was, and I was like, you know, the justice system has attempted to hold him accountable, even though he hasn't been accountable for anything he's ever fucking done to me. I have had to take accountability for my own healing, and that just seems so fucking unfair. And it is unfair, but that is the only thing that we can do is take control over our own healing when it's all said and done. But none of the abuse was your fault.
And remember this, you get to write your story. Too many people think that their story is written for them by their abuser, sadly, and repeatedly. And I tell my clients, you get to write the narrative. You get to define your life now. You get to say, I went through trauma, but I get to define it. It does not define me. And I'll be damned if it is going to continue to hold me back. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it was fucked up and wrong, but it means that you actually have the power to be. It's like a cocoon. You get to come out a beautiful butterfly. That is your choice. It's not an easy route. It's not. It's a lot of healing. But you're in control and you have that power. And knowing that you have that power can be very powerful and exciting and fun because you're the driver. You get to say where you get to go, not your trauma. You get to. So unfortunately, we are coming to the end. We've got to wrap this up. But this is only part one because you know we're going to talk about this some more. Right? Ashley, you're awfully quiet.
Like, girl, I was listening to you preach on the inside. I was like, amen, amen, amen.
But I tell my clients that all the time. I'm like, this is an exciting part now. You've come to therapy. Now you get to grow and shine and be this person that you decide.
And with that, I do want to say this. It's okay if you're not excited. It's okay if you feel like Heather was saying, this is really fucking unfair. Because, and the reason that it's so easy for us as survivors to slip into our own cycle of victim blaming with ourselves is because when they wreak havoc on our lives and they destroy our physical safety and our emotional safety and our mental health, and then they're also destroying your things like your apartment, your car, you get fired from a job, they've destroyed your credit, you're still responsible for cleaning up the mess that they've made. And it's okay if you're not excited. I promise you that there will come a time where the fog will lift and you will begin to feel excited about an opportunity to rewrite your story and recreate your life. But just like a butterfly, when it comes out of a cocoon, it doesn't immediately start flying. Its wings are wet and it has to wait for them to dry and it has to stretch them out and all of these things. So give yourself grace and patience as you adapt to a new setting and a new lifestyle and a new mental, thought process and things like that. So we're so used to our abuser being hard on us and beating us to the ground mentally and physically and verbally, that we do that to ourselves. We pick up where they've left off at. And that doesn't help you to spread your wings and fly.
It's a process. And the good thing is, it may have taken 20, 10, 20, 30 years even to get there. It's not going to take 30 years to repair. It's not. And I can say that because I have seen it in action. It does not take 30 years.
It doesn't have to.
No.
But I think unfortunately, a lot of victims feel like they don't have access to mental health and they don't have, they're all alone and it's easy. I know it was easy for me to slip into addiction as far as like drinking or things like that after abuse and self-harm and things like that. It doesn't have to take that long. And it doesn't have to be that painful by exacerbating the pain and the punishment. So it can be a shorter lived experience.
Shorter lived. Yes. Shorter lived. Not necessarily. It's not. And I tell my clients too, I said, it's not necessarily fun. It's not. It's hard. But when you get to that point where it's really, really, I don't know that I could do this, is usually when the biggest breakthroughs come. So
it beats the alternative too.
Yeah. It's
For
just
sure.
patience. It's just patience. And this is where I'm going to sound like a coach, but I do this all the time. Be kind to yourself. It is the one thing that you need the most, because you haven't been. I can almost guarantee you have not been kind to yourself. Someone even said to me, I don't even know what that looks like.
Yep.
And I said, just give yourself, like you said, Ashley, give yourself grace. Allow yourself to feel. Feelings are not right or wrong. They are valid. Allow yourself to process. Allow yourself to feel. Get a little, figuratively speaking, porta potty and have a pity party for a day. Allow that. And then say, okay, now I'm putting on my big girl pants. They're pull-ups right now. Not completely, but I'm going to now start moving forward. And there will be times that the pull-ups will change colors because
oh my God, Jody. Fuck's sake.
gotta have a little humor too. Can't be all serious.
We're grown-up women. We don't wear pull-ups. We wear Depends.
Okay. Then get your fucking Depends on. Get your poise pads.
Not children.
But just know that the outcome, almost guaranteed, is going to be better than what you were in.
Oh, I totally guarantee it.
With absolute certainty. And it sucks. It is a fucking on your knees, crawling up the mountain, messy, horrible experience. And it's 100% worth it. I can say that from personal experience. Every crawl forward is worth it.
Yeah.
You start out with a giant bag of fucks. By the time you get to the top, you have no more fucks left to give. All been given out. And that is a wonderful feeling.
It is a wonderful feeling.
On that note, any last words for this podcast, ladies?
If you would like to suggest a wine, a topic, a guest, please go to www.lovingsingle.co, click on podcast, and you can submit your wine recommendations, your cup recommendations, your podcast topic recommendations. For now, that is the home of Wine Complain When You Can Wine podcast. And that's all I've got to say, ladies. Loved this chat. It was stellar. And the sangria was awesome too for my
Woo!
day drinking.
Day drinking.
I was gonna say day drinking is always fun.
It is. I listen, when I have no kid and I've got my two best gal friends that we can talk shit together. It's my favorite. On
On
wine
National
day?
Wine Drinking
On
Day or
National
Drink
Wine Day.
Come
Woo.
on now. Don't even play with me.
Yep.
Worth it.
Heather, any last podcast words for this one?
No, I don't have any last words. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. Let us know if you have any questions or comments. I think it would be interesting to get feedback on other people's thoughts on the victim blaming stuff that's happening and what their opinions are and stuff, and whether they had an opinion about it before, maybe it changed or not. I'd be interested in hearing.
Your
That's all.
comments are always welcome. We'd love feedback. There's the lovingsingle.co and WCWYCW1 @gmail. That's harder to remember, but you can get a hold of us at either places. If you forget one or forget the other, or you can also leave comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Audible, and Spotify. Coming soon, hopefully, to Apple and Prime, as soon as I figure out what I did with that account that I made that I can find. Once I made the accounts for the podcast up, I lost it, and occasionally it pops up, so I gotta find it, but we're gonna get there too. And we will see you next Monday. So remember, drink some wine or whatever beverage of your choice, alcoholic or otherwise. We're not going to make you drink alcohol if you don't want to. And we'll see you then.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, did you hear that?
That was awesome.
You know what that reminded me of is the Taco Bell gong. Now
Oh
that
my God. You better grab your glass, Jody. You have to cheers with us.
I thought I
Cheers.
did. Sorry.
Oh, she's drinking on empty right now.
No, there's a little bit left. I was going to fill it up. There was some in there.
Till next time, folks.
Bye.